Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Money Control. Thanks, Chandra, for giving me the opportunity to ask questions versus answering them. And that to someone as interesting and certainly as young as Adit. I don't think I've ever interviewed a younger panelist in my life, so thank you for the opportunity. Welcome, Adit, to your first interview, I think, as a Bangalore company. And many, many congratulations on your journey so far. I think the entire ecosystem is hopeful that your recent fundraise heralds an early spring in what has been a pretty tough winter. So many, many congratulations. So first question is, how does it feel to have proven so many naysayers wrong? All the people who said couldn't, wouldn't, shouldn't. Even today, I think I saw an article somewhere where someone says, oh, the economics are so hard to make it work. So how does it feel to have proven so many people wrong?
Thanks for that very generous introduction from from the whole team here. And look, I think that the journey of Zepto has always had one theme of skepticism, right? It started when we were getting the ball rolling, and when Suvir from Nexus gave us the first institutional round of funding. Most people that we spoke to at the time, most candidates that we tried to hire, most landlords that we tried to get dark stores from, didn't even believe the model was logistically possible. You can't even deliver in 10 minutes if you wanted to, or any timeline that was slower than an hour or faster than an hour, right? And so initially there was like, is this even logistically possible? Second, as we started scaling, I would say in 2022, most people had the question of who even wants 10-minute delivery, right? And what the thought process was. And then obviously as it got scale and there was phenomenal retention and customer love, the third question was, how is this business model going to make money? And now we're in a position where the only reason why we were able to raise the financing that we did is because we were able to prove out the economics and turn the vast majority of our stores free cash flow positive. But I still think, though, candidly speaking, that there's a tremendous amount of proving yet to be done, right? I think our stated ambition is to try to build, hopefully, a truly world-class internet company out of India that can be benchmarked to the Meituans or the Pinduoduos or the Coupangs of the world or the Mercado Libres of the world or the Airbnbs of the world, these sort of, $60, $70 billion plus highly profitable public internet companies. And, that hasn't really been done in India, with maybe one or two relatively small exceptions. And I think to be able to get there, and that's the only option for us. I don't think we can, afford to be happy at what we're doing. I don't think we'll be able to survive unless we really go for a large outcome. I still think that there's, quite a lot of proving left to do. And so, it very much feels like the beginning of the journey of, with still a lot more naysayers left to prove wrong than at the end. So, in a nutshell, although it feels like, we've, gotten quite a bit of success today, for me, I'm still in a position where I feel like an early stage startup founder where there are still lots of risks, lots of things that we need to nail. And I think that's true across, the entire industry right now.
And given now the mood shift around quick commerce, right? And given what you're doing and all your competitors are doing, and it feels like we're going to see a gigantic explosion of dark stores in all cities in India. What is the biggest challenge for you, for Zepto, and even for the category? What are the things that now you worry about versus what you might have worried about earlier?
No, absolutely. Look, I think at this point, the biggest challenge has and always will be maintaining deep execution excellence. And this is a very execution-intensive business, right? From managing one of the most complex back-end supply chains in the country to building out full-fledged alternative businesses like a private label business or an advertising business that are very different from your core competencies, all the way to building a tech and product stack and a warehouse management software system that most e-commerce companies have taken years to build and doing it in a much shorter period of time. So there's execution across multiple verticals, whether it's engineering, whether it's ops, whether it's controllership and finance, whether it's growth, whether it's the new categories that we're launching. And I think what keeps me up at night today is we're at this such an incredible inflection point in the company's history today, and we really have an opportunity to build something exceptional. We've not gotten there yet, but we have that opportunity. But in order to do that, we have to basically nail three things at once, right? We have to nail one, big step jumps in our customer experience, and everything from adding a ton of new selection to reducing delivery times to adding new product verticals and perishables. We have to do that because customers are asking us for more, and we can't ever get to a point where our culture lets that go, right? So we are going very aggressive there. At the same time, because the core business economics are working well, and our stores it used to take us about 23 months to turn a store profitable and about 3.9 crores of capex and operating burn. Now it's only taking us about 8 months to turn the store profitable and about 1.5 crores end-to-end, cash flow. And we're seeing the core economics are getting better and better. They're clearly working. And at this inflection point, it really makes sense to invest, which is why we're launching a few hundred stores, right? We're going to, we're going to be undertaking over the next 12 months one of the biggest retail expansions in Indian history, or one of the biggest, at least you can say, commerce expansions, with the exception of Flipkart and Amazon. And so we have to do that investment aggressively, and at the same time, while changing our customer experience, while expanding, and most importantly, we also have to build a lot of leverage. Right? And that leverage is basically execution-led leverage on each vertical of the business. Keep building efficiency in our supply chain, keep scaling our advertising business, keep expanding product margins with sourcing leverage. All of that has to be done at the same time so that when we do pull out of an investment cycle, we can get to an outcome where we're hopefully, in the not so long term, in the relative near future, we can be generating thousands of crores of PAT, and that's really the objective that we have. So I think none of us are there yet in the industry where we can, very confidently say that, hey, we'd be able to generate 1,000, 2,000 crores of PAT today. But I think if we continue to execute the way that we've been executing for the past 3 years, we execute like that for the next 12, 18 months, then I think we've got a realistic shot of getting there. And so that's what the whole company is focused on. This whole curve of, customer experience, investing in the business, and continue to execute and create leverage so that we can really build large scale and then also large efficiency that gives us, a pretty meaningful outcome.
So the goal for 12 months is essentially what, you're doubling your store network and therefore like increasing throughput by what, 3 times, 4 times?
Absolutely. So if you look at our same store sales growth, it's, historically, and we expect it to continue to be north of 100% year on year. And at the same time, we're doubling our store count pretty aggressively, and we're adding about a dozen new cities. So by March 2025, we'll have at least 700 stores in the system. And the objective is to go to, the likes of, we just launched recently Nasik, Ahmedabad. We're about to launch Chandigarh this week. So, all these new cities are coming up pretty rapidly. So by the end of the year, we'll also have a dozen new cities on top of that.
Fair enough. And given that, a question I had is obviously you, along with the others in the quick commerce space, have grown tremendously and done a fantastic job over the last 3 years, and now the scale is beginning to show. Question is, if I look at the macro India consumption, it's been a pretty tough 5 years, right? I think if you look at the consumption growth, pretty anemic. Even if you adjust for inflation that happened, it has been low single digits. And which means obviously this tremendous increase in scale has come from somewhere, right? In your mind, where does it come from? Is it like modern trade? Is it traditional kirana, the premium stores? Is it e-commerce? Where do you think you're taking share? I know that it's a contested point, and some folks are saying it has come just from India, which I'm a bit skeptical of. But I'm just curious, where do you think it has come from?
So look, I think from our perspective, if I look at it, top down, you look at grocery and household essentials in India, right? 650 billion was bought in FY23. It's one of the largest, untapped markets in the world right now in consumer. So 650 billion FY23, it's growing about 9% CAGR, right? These are my rough numbers. It'll be about 850 billion by FY29, right, roughly. And so you're talking about an incremental 200 billion in just consumption growth, at least what's expected over the next 6 years or next 5 years. And so even if we build, let's say, a business that's double the size of Flipkart, for example, just, humoring that thought, and we're building, let's say, a 25, 30 billion, GMV business, right? Even at that point, and we have 2-3 players that are at that scale. Even at that point, double the size of Flipkart, multiple players in the space, we are less than half of just the incremental consumption growth from 650 billion to 850 billion, that 200 billion. And so I think from our lens, obviously impossible to attribute, exactly what channels, but I think every channel right now in grocery and household essentials is slated to grow. And I think even just from like the incremental consumption that we're getting today and the growth that we think will happen over the next half a decade, there's room to build very, very large businesses even in that space. So I think, modern trade will continue to grow, kirana stores will continue to grow, and we've got quite a bit of space to take a large chunk of that incremental consumption. So I think in a nutshell, you'll see all formats of grocery and household essentials hopefully grow if the next half a decade plays out for India like everybody's expecting it to.
One question I had on just relative to some of the other players who've been building on this growth, they have had other businesses. You have been razor sharp focused on just doing this. Have you been tempted along the way to think about other things? Or do you think it's a distraction? Do you think it has helped you or hindered you? The fact that you just do one thing versus probably every competitor of yours has at least some other business, be it in the same space or be it in a slightly different delivery space.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think we've had the good fortune of competing with, two exceptional consumer internet companies in India that, has really made us a better company. And obviously they've, built out a lot of infrastructure, whether it's engineering, whether it's product, whether it's talent, whether it's the logistics on the ground, and obviously whether it's their capital and balance sheet access, right, that we didn't have for a long period of time. They had all of this infrastructure on day one. And I think, our ambition has been, can we do what, most people have taken half a decade or a decade to do, and can we do it in a much shorter period of time? And hopefully we'll be able to do that. I don't think we're there yet, but it looks like maybe we'll get there. Our thought process, versus, let's say, other businesses is, I deeply believe, every sort of fiber in my body that we're sitting on what could realistically be the largest internet outcome in this country's history. And which I think, if you compare it to even, if you look at the past 20, 25 years of consumer businesses, most of the value creation has been offline, right? Unlike most of the other, I would say, major economies in the world.
Oh, absolutely.
It's largely been offline, right? And I think the internet ecosystem in India, 2012 to 2021, was not as evolved as it should have been, or at least if you benchmark it to China or the US, which is, I think, still fine because it was the first decade, and most ecosystems go through some pain in the first decade, and then they get a reality check, and then there's like a large business outcome after that. I think we're in exactly that sweet spot, sort of similar to like an Amazon in the late 90s, early 2000s, where, we are sitting on the right macro, but we're also sitting on the right business model to build something very large. And if we just nail this, we're sitting on like a 50, 70, $80 billion outcome. It's largely just execution, so it's not guaranteed. I think there could have been potentially companies in the past that could have also built that kind of scale, but we're not able to execute it, right? And it's not easy to execute it. And so we have this opportunity. It's not on a platter for us. We have to go all out to do it, and that's why we're just going to stay razor focused. No real intent, at least for the next many, many years, to get into any adjacent businesses.
No. So you're going to be very, very focused. That's what I hear. A question is, we've, as an investor in consumer brands, and I've seen over the last 15 years that in any big channel shift, the first from general trade to modern trade, and then modern trade to e-commerce, give a huge opportunity for new brand creation and new even category creation, categories that did not exist. Personal care now looks like a fashion category versus it used to be, oh no, very loyal category with, 95% sales in one SKU, and that is no longer the case. Thanks to e-commerce and thanks to, folks like Mamaearth. This disruption, which is from e-commerce to now quick commerce, are you seeing that? Because you will have the best lens view on new categories, new consumer brands, new entrepreneurs. And we've always seen it gives a great chance to beat incumbents. So, what is your perspective and anything to share?
No, absolutely. I mean, we look at this exactly like you pointed out, right? This, new channel gives all, up and coming brands an opportunity to build quick commerce first platforms and get real differentiated advantages there. It's very difficult to differentiate against an incumbent unless you have a channel that's a blind spot for them. And I can tell you that, most of the FMCGs, the large FMCG conglomerates, are still way behind in their understanding of quick commerce.
We want them to stay behind for a little bit longer as investors.
And absolutely. So they're aware of it, but they're able to move. They're not able to move nearly as fast as what we see our D2C partners or our new age partners are able to do. And so, look, in a nutshell, we're already seeing large brands get created. For example, there's Go Zero, which is an ice cream brand, right? That has scaled from negligible to today, across quick commerce, couple 100 crores in a very short period of time. Even for some of the large e-commerce existing brands, for example, let's say a Mamaearth, I think we've got, potential in the next 18, 24 months, at least looking at the numbers that we've looked at, to become the largest channel for them, or one of the largest channels for them, quick commerce, even bigger than their core, let's say, e-commerce channels within the existing cities that we're operating in. And so let's say, these brands that were built on Amazon or Flipkart and all these large e-commerce players, they're also realizing that, obviously growth there has tapered out. Not only are we growing much faster, but the scale that they were expecting for categories like, food or packaged foods or personal care, even beauty and cosmetics, right? A lot of it is, the product market fit is deeper than most people thought. And so, I think right now, in a nutshell, we're already seeing, multi-100 crore revenue businesses getting created in just in the first 2-3 years, almost, large chunk of which is quick commerce. And I think, even within existing large, new age brands, we have the potential to be the biggest channel for them. I would say more so for the relatively low stakes categories, right? So, you've got, if you're buying a smartphone, or if you're buying a fridge, or if you're buying a television, or if you're buying full-fledged fashion, probably not. But if you're buying a high utility, let's say black t-shirt, or you're buying undergarments, like Dimension, for example, is scaling pretty rapidly on Zepto. Or if you're buying, let's say, a basic beauty and cosmetic or personal care SKU, these are relatively low stakes purchases. We're seeing much deeper product market fit on quick commerce than even candidly e-commerce, at least from a customer backward lens. So we think we can really scale it.
No, and I'm certainly hopeful that e-commerce was not very friendly, especially for like food products. Yeah. And I think quick commerce is. So some of the revolution that you saw in personal care and categories like that in e-commerce, I hope absolutely gets replicated in the food product side. That'll be fantastic. So nice to hear that. As you have rolled it out now and you have started proving the unit economics and the fact that, look, your stores are getting profitable, the cost of delivering the product in that 10-20 minutes. So I had two questions. One is, people have been surprised that this thing has worked so well in India and has not worked elsewhere. And I'm glad finally that there is something that we can say that it's worked in India, now you figure out how it works in your country, right? Versus otherwise it's always the other way around, the Uber of India or whatever, Airbnb of India. I'm glad, I'm sure tomorrow, 5 years from now, people will say, what is the Zepto of that country? Question for you is, what do you think helped you? Because it feels as an outsider and as an investor that the e-commerce guys had to invest a lot to convince the customer to purchase. It feels from the outside that you had to do a lot less. So what was it? And as you have now seen consumer behavior, seen them come back and back again and again, what is it about the Indian consumer in this top 10, 12 cities which has enabled this, as you see?
Look, I think you're absolutely right. So, one nice tidbit, obviously fresh off a fundraise, so I have all these numbers in my head, right? We've taken the least amount of capital for any, let's say, a high TAM consumer internet company to hit $1 billion in top line, right? Including food delivery, ride sharing, fintech, e-commerce, at least like $1 billion in, or let's say $250 million in gross margin scale. We've taken the least amount of capital to get there. And, from our perspective, there are a couple of reasons why. I would say one is, so firstly, why it's working so well in India. I think there's just depth of product market fit on the customer side that doesn't exist in most other markets. Most transactions in India and grocery are small ticket, high frequency, versus in other parts of the world, let's say in the US, for example, most grocery purchasing is what you call the pickup truck or SUV style use case, right? These large, drive down to a local Walmart, pick up a huge pallet of groceries, put it in your trunk, come back home and store it in your pantry. In India, most people don't even have a pantry. Most people don't even have a four-wheeler. Yeah. The overwhelming majority is just bought in these small tickets multiple times a week. And quick commerce was the real first format of commerce that could give you, excellence in pricing, selection, quality, and do it with that high frequency, low ticket use case just by virtue of delivering in 10 minutes, right? And so, that style of grocery purchasing, and there are also structural reasons why India purchases that way. One, you've got much higher penetration of perishables versus processed food in other parts of the world. Two, you've got, lower household sizes, smaller household sizes, lower penetration of four-wheelers, which makes large transactions a little bit harder. Three, you've got much smaller amounts of disposable cash flow, even for even for relatively premium customers, right? If you look at the US, percentage of disposable income that goes into grocery and household essentials is like 8%, 9%.
Yeah.
In India, that number is almost 70%. Even if you go to the, urban, relatively well-off customers, the number is still 30, 35%, right? And so people prefer doing small tickets multiple times a week than blocking in their cash up front. And so, all of that has given us much deeper product market fit than people expected. And that product market fit is translated into better CLTV to CAC. It's translated into more throughput per square foot, so our fixed costs are lower. It's translated into a healthy advertising business. So all of that has also helped the bottom line and proven the economics. So that's at a high level why we think it's working. In terms of, capital efficiency, to give you a sense, I would say, obviously one point is, in general, the consumer is trained towards e-commerce, towards food delivery, towards ride sharing. And so, getting the basics right was relatively easy. But also, candidly speaking, I think a lot of it is learning from, misallocation of capital mistakes that were made in the decade prior in consumer internet, and we've had the, I wouldn't attribute it to just our judgment, right? I would
Absence of capital does make you wiser.
That for sure. Absence of capital makes you fight harder to be capital efficient. But also, I think we've got fairly battle-hardened management teams that have seen large-scale consumer internet get built and have, in the past decade, 2012 to 2021, and have realized, okay, these are the mistakes we made. This is the capital we burnt that we shouldn't have burnt. And so we have a little bit of that institutional learning now, where people are, there's lessons learned. People have come from the Flipkarts and Amazons of the world, what to do, what not to do, and we're able to just, I would say, leapfrog some of the mistakes a little bit. But yeah, so all of that has just benefited us. So I think we've been able to allocate capital decently well. But like I mentioned, still a long way to go.
And today, therefore, as you have spoken about the journey to break even profits, and more importantly, at the store level, making the math work, all of it has come just from productivity. You have not had to do, have you had to take something from the customer in terms of pricing or in terms of delivery time? Have you had to take something from your franchisee in terms of margins? Just curious, or has it just come from productivity?
Yeah, no, it's, I would say, there are a couple of buckets. One would be obviously supply chain excellence, which would be like space utilization, reduction of inventory loss, manpower productivity. One part would also be all the other ancillary things that you do, right? Like expanding margins through private label, adding an advertising business, building a lot more depth into marketing so you can get, much more efficient channels of investment, and obviously getting scale and sourcing leverage and getting more margins from your back-end partners, because you've become a more meaningful channel for them that's driving growth for their overall business. And so all of that has helped. I would say, to your point on, has anything come from the customer or come from partners? I think, we try not to. We definitely have had to take some tough calls we're not happy with, and we would like to, ideally build enough leverage in the system where we can, give back more to the customer, which is what we did, for example, with Zepto Pass. Early in the year, the stores were turning profitable. They were turning profitable much faster than we expected, and we said that, hey, we can actually convert some of this capital into better retention, move it into Zepto Pass, and then we launched that, and it did incredibly well, right? We've got over 4 million subscribers, one of the fastest growing subscription programs in the country, and the retention and ARPU numbers are off the charts, right? The overall platform that quarter spiked, and it's continuing to maintain at a pretty heavy baseline. And so, we are constantly trying to figure out how we can give back to the customer. To be honest, I think, because we were so capital constrained very early on in the company's history, pretty much month 7, month 8 is when the Ukraine war happened and capital markets started falling off a cliff. It was a 7-month-old company at the time. I think, 2023, and this is true for a lot of startups, most of us became too financially focused, too short-term financially focused, and not enough focused on sort of long-term customer value. And like, Bezos says, right, there's almost zero misalignment between shareholder value and customer value over the long term.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I think we've tried to push ourselves to be as aggressive on behalf of the customer as possible, but we had to take some calls that we're not happy with. And now we're just trying to figure out how we can keep figuring out leverage and give back more to the customers. Zepto Pass was one thing. Obviously, all the assortment expansion we've done is the second thing. Zepto Cafe is also scaling pretty rapidly right now, which is another customer love initiative. But there's a lot more to do. So I think, our focus right now, at least for the next 12 months, is much more customer centric. In fact, all our financial plans, we're going to start with, we're actually starting customer backward. And so we're saying, okay, 2025, we want to do X. But if it's just revenue and like top line and bottom line, how is this going to change the life of the customer? Right? Why do they care? So now we're working backwards and say, okay, we want to give the customer better delivery times. So we have to allocate our stores this way and get this densification. Or we want to give the customers lower defect rates. So we have to invest in our supply chain, so on and so forth. And we want to give them better prices. We need to get to the scale and sourcing leverage to be able to do that, so on and so forth. And so we start from the customer, and then we actually work backward into what do we have to do financially to get to these customer metrics. And so, candidly, that was not the case in 2023, but it is going to be the case in 2024 and 2025. And I think it's going to be done in a frugal way, but it's going to be done in a way that in the long term will maximize shareholder value, is our thinking.
You've spoken a lot about how the tough times helped you, right? In terms of coming from behind, making every dollar work harder, and everything that you must have done in terms of expansion, in terms of focus, in terms of the model to get to where you've gotten to. Now with capital chasing you, what risk do you see, and how do you deal with a potentially surfeit of capital for you, and also potentially surfeit of capital for the category? So how are you thinking about it? Because the absence obviously made you stronger, but capital is funny. So when it chases and pours, it can also create a lot of bad habits. Now you're forewarned compared to the others, but how are you kind of arming yourself for it?
Totally. Look, I think one of the greatest gifts that we've been given is the fact that we've gone through a deep efficiency cycle before we go through an investment cycle. And so now every dollar is by design, there's so much leverage in the system, is running harder for us. But, in general, like you mentioned, right, like you have a significant amount of capital, the culture can go for a toss, frugality can go for a toss. I think what we've realized is that, there is no real advantage towards blowing up capital to get like short-term spikes in growth, because, at the end of the day, actually that's a waste of capital that could have been put towards better forms of growth. Like today, if you, let's say, give discounts to a mature customer, let's say a customer that's already transacting, you give them a discount, it's just capital destruction, right? You'll get a pop in frequency and in GMV in the short term, but you're not going to get anything after that. And the second that you pull out the discount, there is zero like lifetime value incremental that you're going to get out of that customer, because he's going to go back to his regular behavior post a discount. And so we just think that like doing unsustainable things to try to, pull back growth it's just capital destruction. Rather, I would invest it in things that give me structural growth, like store launches, like, efficient new customer acquisition, right? Things that really are return on equity accretive ways to deploy capital faster and pull back value creation. So I think, in general, the mistakes that were made in the past it was not just growth at all costs. I would argue that it was like nonsensical growth.
Yeah, it was growth that didn't exist actually.
Growth that did not exist. And so I think that if you're really allocating capital well and you're intellectually honest with yourself, you'll be able to deploy capital, maybe even large amounts of capital, but you'll still be able to do it frugally. And there are exceptional examples of this if you look at it globally, like Meituan, for example. They burnt a couple $1 billion. Yeah. And they've now printing billions of dollars of free cash flow, right? So if you look at it in an asset, it makes sense. Uber was the classic example of growth at all costs, right? But actually, if you go deeper, they were actually executing exceptionally well. And now they're printing $5 billion of free cash flow after only burning $15 billion. So as an asset, that's an incredible return, right? That you're getting on that. Airbnb is another example. Pinduoduo is another example. Coupang is another example, right? 600 million of free cash flow. So I think basically in a nutshell, you can deploy capital aggressively in a frugal way, but you have to be honest with yourself, because you need a deep amount of fiscal discipline. And that's what I think has been lacking in the ecosystem. The framework of investing capital is not a bad framework. And I think we've still not realized that, right? But the problem is that you need a deep amount of discipline and excellence to be able to perfect it. Otherwise, you'll go off the cliff and you'll end up bankrupt or you'll end up in a bad position. So, but if you really want to build a $50, $70 billion company in a short period of time, then you have to sort of take the bull by the horns and go for it, but do it with discipline.
That's it with us. I think we've run out of time. Thank you for answering a rapid fire. Thank you, everybody.